Yeah. Boom to the hey, all you sports fans out there in the two-ball-sphere. To you, the individual, as part of the collective. Welcome to Fast Track Sports Rec. Highlights here you can check out overnight. See the graphics there? Here on Talk Radio version of the OMSR. I am your brief but very concise host, Will, the alternative ESPN Sports Thrill, doing the intro voiceover show thing-a-ling-a-ma-jing. Let you know the clip order coming up in the last two wherefores. Only 1 week to kick off this episode, briefly and concisely. All about Ohio State and Braxton Miller. Total bummer. So who in the Big Ten's the favorite now? Quickie Sport Rant is going to be about, the should you go pro or should you not, and what happens to the dudes who get injured when they come back. They can't even play. You're not even be able to play one game this year. In the meantime, roll clips.
Welcome back to College Football Live, presented by Dick's Sporting Goods. Welcome to College Football Live. Chris Cotter, Trevor Maddich, Chris Lowe, Brent McMurphy are here with us today. So we know Braxton Miller out for 2014. He's set to graduate in December. He wants to enroll in graduate school out there at Ohio State University. And Maddich, he says he wants to come back for 2015. You believe he's going to be back?
I believe he'll be back, and I think he has a better chance to win the Heisman in 2015 than this year. Because the guys around him, all these young speedsters that Urban Meyer brought in his first two recruiting classes, will have another year of experience, another year of age, and Braxton Miller will be there to take advantage of that if he comes back in 2015. I think he will, and I think he'll be a monster.
Chris, he could have gone pro this year. He decides to come back to Ohio State. I mean, when you talk about a player who's now going to get work on improving on his mechanics here while he also recuperates from the injury, he's got to go pro, right? You think he's going to come back?
No, I think he's going to. I think he will come back because it's not Andrew Luck we're talking about right here. He was not a guy who was going to be a first or second round quarterback anyway. It makes all the sense in the world that he would come back. So much can happen between now and next year. I think it would be a mistake if he didn't come back.
Now that sets up an issue, though, doesn't it, if he comes back?
Right. I mean, that'd be the best case scenario for Ohio State is if J.T. Barrett is good enough that Braxton Miller is not the starter coming back a year later. I hope he comes back. I guess I'm a little bit more skeptical. Obviously, he's going to say now that he's coming back. He's not going to say, well, I'm done, see ya. So he's going to say that kind of like Jameis Winston. Let's wait till next year and see what happens. I hope he comes back. Actually, there's some Ohio State fans who actually think Ohio State, like Trevor mentioned, could be much better the following year if Braxton is back because of all the young talent.
But poor J.T. Barrett.
For this year.
I mean, you redshirt, you're recuperating from an injury in high school. You bide your time. You play as a freshman. You take your lumps. Now in 2015, you're Barrett. You're ready to have a fantastic season with all these other young guys around you that you've been in the system with now for a couple of years, and you get big-footed out by Braxton Miller. That will interrupt his progress. But for Ohio State, one kid has got to take one for the team. But for the team, that would be a fantastic scenario.
Sort of, but is there a way where it couldn't be a fantastic scenario? To your point, he takes his lumps this year, Barrett does, and then he has the leadership of the team. He's ready to go next year. As you said, he's got all that talent around him, and here comes Braxton Miller to kind of usurp it again, and it throws a wrench into the works.
There's the old unwritten rule that you don't lose your position to an injury.
Oh, no.
You hear that a lot, though. I'm not saying
but you do lose it to a better player.
Right. Yeah. But here's, if you're Urban Meyer, and he may not say it publicly, these guys, it creates a lot of competition. Coaches love competition in the off-season, the summer, spring ball, and I think that's what this would do.
What if they win 11 games this year under Barrett? What if they do? Then what happens next year?
In that case, Barrett is going to be the best backup in America. And they'll have Kenny Guyton come back and tell him, look, I know how that is.
Yeah, and it's
I
not
know
great.
what it's like. It's not great, but this is where Barrett will be able to show his leadership going forward for his next 2 years. This is why. If he doesn't complain, if he falls into line behind Braxton next year and is the perfect Kenny Guyton type of guy, then he will have the respect of the team going into 2016.
Well, if
he complains about it, then there's an issue.
We also don't know how Miller's going to respond. He's going to have a second surgery. It could take up to 9 months or longer to get back where he's ready to go. So maybe he's not the same Braxton Miller. Hopefully he is. It's not his legs, it's his arm.
Yeah.
It could impact him on the field as well.
Braxton Miller, and you hate it for the kid, has got to prove he can stay healthy. He has not been able to do that yet. Now, a lot of bad luck. But I think that's the thing that you look at. He has not been able to be healthy for an entire season.
Not that Ohio State would ever want to copy anything that Michigan ever does on the field, but remember Gardner and Shoelace? Remember when Robinson was in the game as a running back and Gardner was the quarterback? Could they do something like that? Because, as you mentioned, it's his arm, not his legs.
Yeah.
Probably one of the best running backs in the Big Ten right now.
You're thinking outside the box there. That is a great point. Now, Barrett would have to be phenomenal because Ohio State has a bunch of really good young running backs that will be coming into their own, not this year, but really next year. And so to put Braxton Miller in there, well, you've got Barrett on the field, but one of those running backs is off the field.
Right.
I think if Miller comes back, he is absolutely going to play quarterback. And I think possible.
Right.
It's possible.
I mean, Urban's known to recruit some quarterbacks. Tim Tebow, Cam Newton, even though Cam didn't end up finish at Florida. So obviously he liked Barrett. Barrett has the tools that he likes. I'm not saying he's going to be the next Braxton Miller, but maybe this kid surprises us all.
Urban did mention a story back when he was at Utah, and he had a young kid by the name of Brett Elliott playing quarterback for him, broken wrist in the second game, so he had to turn to an unknown backup who happened to be Alex Smith, and they won 10 games that year at Utah.
Yeah,
so
that worked out pretty well.
He was
First
quick
pick in the draft.
to mention that story and say it's been done before, and maybe it'll be done
We're
again.
going to date ourselves. We're probably the only two that get it. Wally Pipp. He may get Wally Pipp.
He may. That certainly remains to be seen. So what are the expectations now for Ohio State? We know what Vegas thinks, but what do you think Ohio State can do this year?
Ohio State can still make the playoff. They can still make the playoff.
Can or will make the playoff?
Which
can. Here's the problem.
Big Ten playoff?
No, the national championship playoff. The thing is, their big game there is in November against Michigan State, but they've got some tricky games earlier, especially Virginia Tech, breaking in 4 new offensive linemen with a disruptive Virginia Tech front seven. That's a problem. Virginia Tech trashed Alabama's new offensive lineman in the opener last year.
Outgained Alabama.
But here's what happens, though. What happens without Miller in there is that you can expect for the first part of the season the scoring to be down for Ohio State. That means that they have less margin for error. Auburn had some miracles go their way to get to the national championship game. Well, a couple of those bounces going against Ohio State, they no longer have Miller in there to bail them out. So they still can get to that point, but the margin for error is much lower.
They won't get there because they've got to go 13-0 to get to the playoff, because with that schedule, there's only one top 25 preseason team, Michigan State. Maybe somebody else from the Big Ten climbs up in the top 25 before they play Ohio State.
They can beat Michigan State.
They're going to have to. They're going to have to go 13-0 because I don't think 12-1 Ohio State with that schedule gets in the playoff.
But thank you for giving me a definitive answer that they won't get there.
You're
welcome. What do you think, Lo?
No way does a one-loss Ohio State team get to the playoff. Here's the thing.
No way. All right.
You forget about Happy Valley. That game in Happy Valley, I think that's the game that even before Braxton Miller, I looked at and said, well, that's a tough game.
Yep.
I still think, though, there's a decent chance that Ohio State rolls into that game unbeaten.
Yeah.
Now,
And that's another issue with Braxton. That's right. The problem is some of the weaknesses on that Ohio State team are magnified because of this, and Penn State is one of those.
Right.
Revamping the secondary, going up against Christian Hackenberg, who will be probably a top 5 NFL draft pick when he comes out, without Braxton Miller there.
Yeah,
That's an issue.
Now, meanwhile, Michigan State is saying, hold on a minute here. We're the defending champs. We won the Rose Bowl last year. Vegas had Ohio State installed prior to the injury as the favorite. Now it's Michigan State as the favorite. And yesterday, Joe Rexrode from the Detroit Free Press tweeted out what Spartan All-American defensive end Shalik Calhoun said about their DC Pat Narduzzi. Each and every day he tells us how much we stink and how we're not as good as last year's defense. So, Trevor, when you look at Michigan State now, the defending champs, maybe feeling a little disrespected by Ohio State being the favorite. I mean, but yet they had such a good year last year. Is Narduzzi trying to keep them in check, trying to keep them focused?
Oh, yeah. They will not allow egos to take over. And by the way, he misspelled stink. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I noticed that.
Misspelled stink.
Yes.
Yeah. But that's exactly right. Narduzzi, I spent some time this offseason in Pat Narduzzi's office talking to him. And we talked about how they hit a lot. Even their own quarterbacks in practice, not the starter. But like the scout guys, the second team, they will light them up in practice. And in the Rose Bowl practice at the end of the season, they were full tackling in some of those practices. And I asked Narduzzi in his office if people don't think that that's too much hitting. And here's what he said to me. Some people are just too soft.
All right, some good stuff going on there. Talked about Michigan State's defensive coordinator. You guys stink. Since when did SUCK become something you can't say over the air? It's not a bad word. I don't know. Chris Cotta being errant to the cautious side. It's always good. Never use bad language on this show. either, as Reese Davis is fond of saying, and so is Will here, yours truly at the OMSR, run a kid-friendly sports talk show here. No bad language, no euphemisms, no innuendo. Alright, so Braxton Miller decides to come back, going into the quickie sport rant here. Gets injured. It's happened to many a high-profile player. Now, it happens to lots of dudes as well you don't hear about. Because the implication of the impact not being as high-profile a player, so like in their junior year, was never an issue for them. Is it's available for them to go pro or not their senior year? Of course they're going to come back. Frankly, I think a lot of dudes should come back and just finish out. Get your degree. Finish out that college experience, but you are going to take a chance. And so, should you stay or should you go now? Like that classic tune from the, what's that band from the 80s and 90s? You guys know who I'm talking about. I'll spare you the rest. Anywho, you take a chance on that for sure. And what we didn't get detail-wise is how that happened. You don't injure a shoulder just throwing the football. He must have gotten tackled or something, right? So, does Urban Meyer run a tough practice? I was having seen some of the practice footage from Ohio State this year. I seem to recall the green jersey on Braxton Miller and all the QBs, but we just don't know that. But you got to be willing to live with the consequences. And to extend that out another year, or should you go pro then? Boy, I don't know. That's a 50-50. I'm sitting on the fence at it myself. All the video highlights courtesy to ESPN and College Football Live. Everything else to the OMSR. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching those silly DUIs while you're out there as we get ready to kick off the season this upcoming weekend. We are later out here.